Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth Sacramento Regional Water Bank Stakeholder Forum. My name is Vanessa Nishikawa, and I'm part of the Water Bank team, and we're excited that you've joined us here tonight. We've got a lot of information to share with you. These stakeholder forums are meant to be part of our public engagement process, and they're opportunities for discussion with the community, and they're part of our ongoing dialogue with you all, so we are very happy to have you here. This is our fourth one so far, but not our last. But before we get into the agenda for tonight, let's quickly go over some ground rules. The first one is participation. If you have a clarifying question relevant to the agenda section that we're presenting on, please use the Q&A feature in your toolbar on the bottom to submit your question. And just as a reminder for everybody, we're going to have a question and answer session for the remaining questions towards the end of the event. So if there's a general discussion question or feedback you'd like to provide, please hold that until the end for the general Q&A. And a reminder that this is a remote meeting. If you're having technical difficulties, please send a chat message to the meeting host and we can address your issue there. And we are using Zoom webinar tonight, so we can't unfortunately show an active list of current participants, but we will be welcoming and acknowledging everyone in the chat as the meeting progresses. People can't see that chat before they log on, so we're going to wait for a little bit until we welcome all the participants and put that list in the chat so you can see who is online with you today. And if you think of something and we're not at the end of that segment and pausing for clarifying questions, just again, drop in the Q&A so we can capture your questions and input. And if you think of something later, as I often do, email us at waterbankinfo@rwah2o.org. And Christy will drop that email in the meeting chat a little bit later. So moving on to the next slide. We do have a lot to cover, but we're hoping that, hold on. So the agenda for tonight. We've got a couple topics on the agenda for tonight, and we have a lot of information to present to you, and we'd love to hear your questions and your feedback. The first is welcoming and introduction on what is the RWA and the roles and responsibilities here. The second agenda item is water bank background and basics. So what is the Sacramento Regional Water Bank? And the next agenda item is water bank planning and coordination, communications and engagement, institutional and technical work, and modeling and environmental. So what kind of activities have we done, are we doing, and will we be doing in the future? And then the focus is on the water accounting system that is being developed for the water bank. We're going to go through a couple different components in there. So it's the overview and the fundamentals of the water accounting system, the actual components or pieces of the water accounting system, consistency with groundwater sustainability plans, and lastly, implementation and administration and next steps. One of our last topics we're going to cover is previewing what's ahead. So the roadmap of 2025 water bank activities, and then we'll conclude with a general Q&A session. So we do have a lot to cover, but again, we're hoping to have a brief pause at the end of each segment just to address some clarifying questions. And at the end, we'll be able to have more time for discussion type questions and feedback. And now I'll hand it over to Jim to get into the background and basics.
Thank you, Vanessa. I am Jim Piper. I am the Executive Director of the Regional Water Authority. I'm also the Executive Director of the Sacramento Groundwater Authority. Let me start by introducing the Regional Water Authority. The RWA's mission is to serve and represent the interest of regional water providers for the purpose of, and stakeholders for the purpose of improving water supply reliability, availability, quality, and affordability. Hang on a second. This computer is asking a question. I need to address that. Thank you very much. Before I get too far, though, I want to say that Mr. Trevor Joseph from our office could not be here tonight. He is the staff lead for the Regional Water Bank. He had a matter that was such that he couldn't participate tonight, but we expect Trevor to be back for future stakeholder meetings. Because of that, we are dividing up some of the workload on this slideshow and this event tonight. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So real quick, roles and responsibilities of the Regional Water Authority and other entities for the water bank. The Regional Water Authority leads and coordinates the water bank development effort. There are a number of participating agencies, including RWA member agencies. These are agencies supporting the water bank development by providing funding, guidance, and direction. These agencies will also be implementing the elements of the water bank in the future. The RWA will have a role, though, as a coordinating entity and ensuring that that organization brings in the data from its members. There are a number of external water bank partners, which the RWA engages on behalf of the water bank participating agencies. There is state and federal agency involvement. One of the goals of the water bank is to seek federal acknowledgement of the water bank, but these are agencies, but the broader suite of agencies include agencies with regulatory, permitting, and funding roles. And that includes the Department of Water Resources, the State Water Board, the Bureau of Reclamation, and a number of other entities. Stakeholders are non-governmental organizations, other entities, and individuals with an interest in the water bank. Next slide, please. You see here a map of the region, including a number of the participating agencies and also the two subbasins, which will be where the water bank actions will be taking place, the North American Basin and the South American Basin. So I'm going to go over a little bit of what is the Sacramento Regional Water Bank. Next slide. Water banks recharge and store water underground on behalf of specific parties. Water banks require formal accounting systems to keep track of balances. Balances are drawn down during dry times. They are recharged during wet times. There's a neat graphic here, or a couple photographs or diagrams, if you will, which show that action. One of the things that's going on, though, is the RWA has spent a fair amount of time, the RWA and its consultants, in developing the accounting mechanisms. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. Next slide. So for recharge and recovery actions, storing the water underground, we have a number of existing facilities in place to divert surface water, including diversion works on rivers, water treatment plants, and distribution systems. They treat the water for use by the participating agencies, or they inject it underground. Recovery is done through pumping water from the groundwater and serving it to its customers, groundwater basin, and serving it to its customers. You see here sort of a generalized graphic of some of the major facilities within the region, including transmission mains, which overlie the North American Basin and the South American Basin. Next slide, please. One of the things that we want to also talk about, just to bring clarity, is some project exclusions. New facilities are not being proposed as this project. Not being proposed, nor would any new facilities be authorized as part of this project. Changes in surface water rights and contract supplies are not being proposed as part of this project. Often we'll get questions from some state or federal entities regarding these questions. We wanted to clarify that here. Next slide. Benefits. A key benefit is local and regional water supply reliability, having water available in particularly dry years. Another key element, particularly for our region, is to provide ecosystem, fish, and wildlife benefits, particularly when the surface water is scarce. Many member agencies might be able to utilize stored groundwater in a recovery action, freeing up precious surface water for other purposes. Water quality is another key project benefit, and economic benefits. This will allow our member agencies that participate in the water bank some economic advantages to facilitate increased conjunctive use. Next slide. Real quickly, some groundwater and recharge methods. You see a number of them here. This region primarily uses aquifer storage and recovery and in lieu recharge. With aquifer storage and recovery, that is where you have direct recharge, generally from a water distribution system, a municipal system. Water is injected from wells into the groundwater basin. And in lieu recharge is a mechanism where water agencies stop pumping groundwater and allow the water to naturally recharge in the groundwater basin. Next slide. This is a helpful slide to show the scale of groundwater recharge in our region. In this map, you see Lake Tahoe off to the east, and you see a snowpack. This is sort of a representation of snowpack. You'll see what says surface water storage. That's Folsom Reservoir. It's rather small compared to the groundwater basin next to it. Historically, our region has relied on snowpack and surface water and groundwater, but often separately. As we experience the effects of climate change in the future, we're going to have more variability. The surface water is going to be a little bit less reliable. We're going to have decreased snowpack in the future. And that's our primary adaptation mechanism for that is the groundwater bank. Going forward, we feel that our region needs to store more groundwater, store that water when surface water is available, and recover that when times are dry. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ibrahim Kadam from our project team. Thank you, Ibrahim.
Thank you, Jim. Let's talk a little bit about how the water bank works. Fundamentally, as Jim mentioned, the key idea of the water bank is trying to leverage the surface and groundwater resources available in the region. As you can see from the slide here, this is a representation of current water use in the region. In typical wet years, we use more surface water than groundwater. And then in a very dry year, like 2015, a critical dry year, the overall use goes down, but we still use some groundwater and some surface water. Again, I emphasize this is kind of a collective look at all of the surface and groundwater use by all of our municipalities in the region. As they shift from wet to dry year, some had invested in facilities, so they shift from surface water to groundwater. And so that's enabled them to kind of reduce their reliance on surface water in dry years. Next slide. What we're hoping through the water bank, again, looking at the wet conditions, and we still see substantial use of groundwater. And we do have the available water supplies, like in wet conditions, like right now, we have plenty of surface water. The question is, could we increase, or we not could, but we should increase our surface water use and reduce our groundwater use during wetter conditions? When we do that, we allow groundwater recharge to accumulate in the basin via the in lieu mechanism, therefore creating storage in the basin. Next. On the flip side, when we look at a dry condition, yet we're using still a significant portion of our demand is still met with surface water in a dry year. We could rely on the water we stored in wet conditions and reduce our reliance on surface water and use some of this banked groundwater in dry conditions. That's what we call recovery. And so basically our portfolio shift now As you can see, we use more surface water in wet years, much less surface water in dry year, and more groundwater in dry years. The net result is we leave more surface water in full sun and more surface water on the lower American River and downstream areas, which will have multi benefits to end users as well as also the ecosystem benefits. Next slide. This slide illustrates the success here in the region that have occurred over multiple years through the implementation of conjunctive use. Basically, agencies in this area have invested infrastructure to bring additional surface water supply just to implement exactly the concept we've talked about it. And that story and that's achievement resulted in halting the decade of groundwater decline, reversing it, and making it sustainable, even in the face of the most recent drought we faced through 2014, 2015, and even more recently through the last couple of years, our groundwater basin remained resilient. And that's all the result of these investment we made in conjunctive use. So basically what we say, this is a proof of concept. The concept has already been proven. We already did it. What we're trying to do through this project is further expand these activities. Next slide. Ultimately, what we want to hope is to develop a groundwater bank in the Sacramento region, in the American River basins. There is a number of groundwater banks developed, especially in the southern San Joaquin region, in Tulare and Kern County and King County areas. Those has been developed and approved for banking of Central Valley project by Bureau of Reclamation. We are hoping that our Sacramento Regional Bank will be the first water bank north of the Delta in Northern California. It allows us to more efficiently use our Central Valley projects water that we have to further expand our surface water use in the region and augment our groundwater supplies. Next slide. Developing this water bank, there is a very solid framework for that the water bank has to comply with and work from. Again, we're building on top of, and we have to be compliant with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that define and provide protections and guarantees for groundwater sustainability. We have to meet the environmental requirement under the California Environmental Quality Act, and also the National Environmental Protection Act, CEQA and NEPA. We have also to comply with the State Water Board and Bureau of Reclamation policies. And then more importantly, locally here, we have the Water Forum Agreement that set up the framework for how we manage our resources sustainably, and the bank would definitely work within the Water Forum Agreement framework. Next slide. Vanessa?
Okay, just want to pause quickly and see if there are any clarifying questions on the materials that were just covered.
And I would just add that most of the material we covered to date, we covered it in details in Stakeholder Forum 1 and 2 and 3. And so if you want more details, you can go back to the recording of these Stakeholder Forums.
There is one question in the Q&A. Jim, would you like me to answer one?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there's a question from Barbara Evoy. Your intro implied that you were looking at limited recharge sources. Have you ruled out using floodwaters or flood flow waters in permeable areas for recharge?
Great question, Barbara. And I want to sort of give you a tentative answer. We will see if, when Trevor returns, if he wants to add to this. But I think we are open to looking at that, or definitely I think that would be a helpful item for recharge in the future. I think that might be something that we do want to look at. I don't know of any project right now, though, which aside from a small scale up in the North American subbasin, where that is a major source of recharge. But I think we need to get back to you on that one. I'd like to get Trevor's opinion on that one also. Thanks for asking that question.
Okay, I don't see anything else in the Q&A, so we can move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the water bank planning and coordination activities. So here's where we'd like to kind of talk about what we've done, what we're doing, and where we intend to go in areas such as communication engagement, institutional and technical work that's supporting water bank development, modeling and environmental work, and then what you can see at the bottom there is overall project management. So next slide, please, and we'll get into those in a little bit more detail. So water bank project communications and engagement. There are several things that are going on in the communication engagement front on the water bank. We have continual public communications, up-to-date website information at sacwaterbank.com. And we also have questions of the week that are posted with information that is germane to where we are with water bank development, or also things that are coming up in different discussions so that we can address topics that are of interest to folks. And there's also continual engagement with agencies and stakeholders such as yourselves. This is our 4th Stakeholder Forum. Our first one was held back in October of 22, and then we had another one in December of that year. We met with folks in, we met with folks in February of the following year, met again in December of 23, and here we are now in February of 2025 with our 4th Stakeholder Forum and bringing information to you, giving feedback and asking questions. We've also been continuing to coordinate with the groundwater sustainability agencies, and we also have been working with small groups and NGOs and larger groups such as the Water Forum, ECOS, and others. And we're also continuing to coordinate with state and federal agencies such as DODWR, the State Board, and Reclamation. Next slide, please. Okay. Water bank project, also institutional framework and support. There's a lot of things that have been done to date, things that are going on now, and things that we're moving in the future. If you remember back from probably middle of 2023, we developed a document called the Goals, Objectives, Principles, and Constraints, which set the direction for the water bank activities, such as the overall strategy, alternatives formulation, how we're going to conduct the analyses, the need for environmental documentation, and governance, and things like that. That was followed by an actual governance document in, let's see, I believe that was maybe the 3rd quarter of 2023, that touched on organizational framework, functions, and associated roles and responsibilities for implementation of the actual water bank itself. What we're currently working on, and what you'll hear more from the team in a moment, is the actual water accounting system. So the way that we're going to enable effective and transparent management and monitoring of water bank activities within the North American and South American subbasins, and all the processes and the information that's going to go into that. There's also the monitoring and mitigation plan, which addresses a lot of questions that folks have had about how are we going to track things and how are we going to respond to things. And so that is currently under development with the monitoring activities that are going to be going on related to recharge and recovery actions. And also we'll be talking about the adaptive management actions that will go on in response to what we see from the monitoring that comes up. And then finally, there's contractual and financial agreements that are related to supporting the water bank and its implementation. We're not quite at that yet. There's still a lot of other things that need to be developed up to that point, but that is a future item to look at how the contracts and the financial agreements would support continual implementation of the water bank itself. Next slide, please. And then there's the environmental review. The environmental process has begun, is in process, and will continue to move forward. RWA is proposing to establish the water bank, or which is calling the project in the environmental documentation. The discretionary action or the discretionary approval is needed by RWA per the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. RWA determined the need to prepare an EIR and is currently in process for that. There was an NOP or notice of preparation that was initially issued on the proposed project back in September of 23. There were some changes that occurred based on feedback that was received on the NOP through the public scoping process. And so the project was revised and an updated NOP was issued in June of 2025. So there were also associated with both of those, the initial NOP and the reissued NOP, letters requesting consultation with the California Native American tribes. And so things were also mailed to request that they participate. And then finally, where we're looking for in the future, as we continue to develop the environmental documentation and work on the modeling and work on looking at the potential impacts and effects of the actual proposed project, there'll be a public draft EIR that will be released, anticipated in late 2025 or early 2026. And that will include the mandated comment period on that. And so you will also have the opportunity to provide feedback on the public draft EIR when that does come out. Next slide, please. And the modeling and technical analyses, which are being done to support the resource impact analysis for that public draft environmental impact report. What these analyses are doing are evaluating the water bank proposed operations for consistency with the goals of the adopted GSPs, as well as the goals and objectives of the water bank itself. We'll be looking at evaluating banking losses in those analyses, so looking at the outflow to surface water bodies and neighboring basins. And the modeling that's being used, the models that are being used in this analysis are relying on the most up-to-date data and tools. So calcium-3 is being used to assess the effects and benefits of water bank operations on the CVP and the SWP, on the Delta, and on other third parties. The Fine Grid Integrated Water Flow Model, or IWFM, is being used for groundwater subbasins to assess compliance with the GSPs, effects on interconnected surface waters, and effects on third parties in the subbasins. You may also be familiar with the other name for the model that's been used within the NASB and the SASB, which is COSANA. That model was used to look at what was in the currently adopted GSPs, and the data and the tools have been updated since then, and those are going to be used in the modeling for the water bank. Next slide. Any clarifying questions on the planning and coordination activities to date, or what we're moving on to in the future? Looks like there are two questions. I'm going to get to that screen. The first question is from Suzanne Pesci. Will there be any counting of domestic well owners in the SASB2 acre feet in the operation of the water bank?
I don't immediately know the answer to that question. I think that we need to see, and I think that's something we can get back to Suzanne on, and also sort of disclose this at the next meeting. My understanding is often domestic well owners are sort of excluded from measurements in terms of their use. They're de minimis pumpers. But we'll have to get back to you, Suzanne, on this one. There's another question from Ocean Reserve, and the answer to that is yes. We will make these slides available.
Yes, these slides, along with the recording, will be posted on the Water Bank website after the Stakeholder Forum. And there's another question from Barbara Egoy. Can you describe the specific details of the coordination you have done with the South American Basin GSAs?
Yeah, this is another one where I wish Trevor Joseph was here tonight, because I know that he has been coordinating these efforts with the executive director, John Woodling. We'll have to get back to you on that question also, Barbara.
But there have been a few, coordination meetings with the GSAs on a larger scale, and I know that, like you said, Jim, Trevor has been working back and forth with these.
He has indeed. Yeah, he's been working through a number of issues and concerns that the GSAs would have.
And there's a question from Chris Peterson. Are both in lieu and direct recharge ASR being simulated in the groundwater model runs?
That's correct, Chris.
There is a question from Chris Bonds. What are the team's thoughts on using the Folsom South Canal within the South American subbasin for conveyance and groundwater recharge in areas along the FSC that are conducive to such activities?
Yeah, I'd like to address that one. So I'll just first say it's a really good idea. There are some challenges to this. I don't know if that would be an idea that would have the full embrace of the environmental community. I think we'd have to work through those issues. I think that this is something that many people are interested in. This is related to the question that came up a little bit earlier about sort of direct recharge on floodplains. Again, I would like to get Trevor's take on that. But there are no current plans to do this. Again, there's a number of things to work through. You would need a contract with Reclamation to be able to utilize that facility. I think there's a lot more analysis that would need to happen in order to understand the viability, what kind of water would you use, and so forth. But from a very, very high level, this idea has merit.
I don't see any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So maybe we'll move on to the water accounting system.
Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So we are going to provide a little bit of an overview about the water accounting system. As we discussed, this is a very critical component for our successful water banking operation. We have spent the last few months, 6 to 8 months, kind of thinking and working through this. And we had, at least I participated in at least 3 meetings with all of the GSAs, ground sustainability agencies, in both the north and south subbasins to talk about different ideas for accounting and how that works. You can see represented in this map. So what is the water accounting system and why we need it? So it's basically, in its fundamental, it's a collection of procedures and protocols for how we're going to account for all of the activities associated with banking. And then at the very, very end of it, there would be developed a tool that would be house the data, and that the data will be made available, publicly available, reporting to the GSA for to ensure that the water bank is compliant with Sigma and for all of the transparency and accountability needed. So that's kind of in a nutshell. We're spending a lot of time, as I mentioned, on the water accounting system because we really need it for effective management to comply with all of the requirements, including Sigma, ensure transparency and accountability, and also operational clarity. Next slide. So we've been working through what we call a concept paper to outline the water accounting system component. So far, we have worked to define the fundamentals or principles that will help us guide the development of the bank. We developed the procedure for how we track the different groundwater banking activities, and we'll shortly talk about those. We spent time talking to the GSAs, the ground sustainability agencies, about how we ensure compliance with the GSP goals and how we set up an effective coordination down the road. We outlining how the administration and implementation of the system will unfold and who will be responsible for different components. One of the key things I want to highlight is the water accounting system is being set up to be much broader than the Sacramento Regional Water Bank. The water accounting system would cover the entire North and South American River Basin and will be a platform that through which we can account for any groundwater banking program that might take place in the region. So the SAC Regional Water Bank would be one component with that will be tracked in that system. For example, harvest water and their recycled water delivery to the ag in South Sac to kind of offset some of the groundwater basin and augment groundwater recharge is another banking program that also we're working closely with harvest water, such that the harvest water program can be also tracked within this accounting system. In the future, the idea is about the flood MAR that has been mentioned about moving water through the canal and then recharging. If that came to fruition, that also can be tracked through this system. So that's why it's broader. And then finally, we kind of worked with different participants to kind of set up examples and illustration about how you can actually do accounting for different water supply portfolios. Next slide. So this is this slide and next slide is really important. So here are the principles or the fundamentals for how the water accounting systems work. One is recharge first, i.e., we asking everyone who do banking to make sure that they bank water first before they extract water from the bank. So always there will be a positive bank. We want to make sure there is a responsible banking. So that means no more net banked water can be recovered, but after accounting for losses. We will be, as I mentioned, setting up program-specific accounts. So it will be a specific account for the SAC Regional Bank, a specific account for harvest water, a specific account for other banking program as needed. We will develop separate water budget for each one of the GSPs, i.e. for the North and South, to make sure the reporting and compliance with each one of the GSP is clear. Next slide. Very important is transparency and consistency. That's kind of an important guiding principle. So that's why we're developing these procedures. We're reaching out to all interested parties to get their input. And then at the end of the day, all of the data housed in the GSP will be publicly available. We are also setting up the system to comply with the applicable regulatory requirements, those being groundwater banking guidelines for CBP or from DWR or again, the GSPs. The water, very important also, the water accounting system does not impose restriction on the independence and of local water managers. So if you are a water purveyors, if you're using your water, your wells, the water accounting system does not prevent you, does not limit you, does not intended to restrict you. What it does, it sets clear rule for what counts as banked water and what counts as recharge, what counts as recoverable water. So whatever your operation is, you check it again in the water accounting system, then you determine it qualifies banking or not, but you already have existing framework that govern your operation, and the water accounting system does not is not here to limit your authority or independence. Next. Do you wanna
pause a little bit?
let's pause here. We covered a lot of material. Yes.
There is a question from response. Where are the boundaries of the IWFM model for the SAC Regional Water Bank? What types of boundary conditions are being used, and how are those boundary conditions determined? That kind of goes back to the modeling and technical discussion.
Yeah, good question, Chris. The model we used. Oh, we have Ali here. Ali, do you want to talk about that?
We have an expert in the room.
Yes, just
Let's do it. Let's do a sound check. Can people hear Ali Tagabi, Mr. Ali Tagabi, when he speaks? Ali, can you?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. This is Ali Tagavi, and thank you, Chris, for the question. The question was, what are the boundaries of the areas that the water bank covers? The water bank, in its general terms, it's encompassing quite a number of partners, the North American Subbasin and the South American Subbasin. So to that extent, we are covering the boundaries of the basin as developed by the Bulletin 118, the DWR's Bulletin 118. However, the specific partners and the boundaries of the entities who are participating in the water bank is basically used to develop the boundaries of the water bank entities, so to speak. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think he has a question about how the data were developed and the boundary conditions were developed, and I think those are part of the
The boundary
GSPs.
conditions, are part of the hydrologic and hydrogeologic boundary conditions that were developed as part of the development of the COSANA model. To the north is the Bear River, to the west it's Feather and Sac River, and to the south is going to be the Cosumnes River and American River smack in the middle between the North and South American subbasins. On the east side, the boundary conditions are defined at the foothills, and the boundaries of the Bulletin 118 define groundwater system, and any boundary flow that's coming in from the foothills, from the different watersheds that are on the system, on the eastern edge of the system, those are all simulated within the model over the course of the hydrologic period that's covered in the model.
Okay.
There's one more question in the chat. Given the recharge first principle, just curious to know if any credits will be allowed for recharge activities that have occurred in the past. And this is coming from Chris Peterson. So I think we're going to be touching on water bank starting balance and previously banked water as we go along.
Yeah, Mr. Peterson, maybe we could come back and answer that question. That is might be anticipating this question. It's something that is of interest by a number of people, agencies, other stakeholders. But we're going to come back and answer this question a little bit.
Okay, nothing else in the chat or the Q&A.
Thank you. Yes, please. So, talking about the water accounting system components, I just want to quickly go over a number of terminologies. This might feel a little bit dry, but it's really important because there is some terminologies here that is commonly used, and we've defined them here is a kind of a specific definition. So, just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, recharge and deposit, that's mean directly or indirectly adding water to storage in the basin. We'll talk about that. When we use the word recovery here, it means withdrawal of stored or banked water for beneficial use. Banking balance, it's basically the remaining amount of banked water available for recovery after we account for losses. Banking losses, specific here within the context of this water accounting system, meaning that water is physically unrecoverable. That the banked water that become physically unrecoverable due to factors such as they migrate out of the basin or they seep out into the interconnected surface water bodies. We use a term of art, we call it leave behind. It means that water we intentionally leave in the basin, so it's physically recoverable, can be used, but we choose to leave it in storage in the groundwater basin. Maybe use the word donation, but it's basically contribution from the banking partners to for the health and sustainability of the basin and to support local water supply reliability. You will hear us talking about baseline and operation baseline. It's basically talking about an entity that uses surface water or groundwater or both and the base, and we will talk about their baseline, i.e., how do they operate absent the water bank? So we want to know what type of demand they have, what type of surface water and groundwater they use. They may use a different mix in wet and dry conditions. So that all becomes part of their operation baseline, i.e. their operation absent of the water bank. We talk about groundwater storage rights, which is meaning who banked the groundwater, and so who gets a credit. So that's really, really important in California, because then you have we have to track which water has been used for recharge. Is it CBP water? Is water rights? What's the place of use? If it's being recovered later. And so I think we just want to make sure that's kind of clear and tracked. We were going to use another term of art for gone surface water, which basically mean a surface water entity who is using surface water voluntarily choose not to use their surface water and leave it, for example, in storage in Folsom, or leave it in the rivers, and instead use banked groundwater to meet its needs. And so that surface water, we call it foregone surface water.
Onto that, it's really important that we have all these definitions of these components so that we're all talking from kind of the same page of what we mean when we're talking about the water accounting system and how things are working. And this is also getting these definitions and working on them was no small feat, but it's also in reaction to or in response to some of the questions that you all have asked us about what do you mean by such and such, or how are you going to use that? So, thank you all for your input on that, because that has helped us clarify the water accounting system.
Yeah. Next slide. So the water accounting system will have detailed, once it become available for all of your review, it will have detailed language about how we define recharge, how it's going to, what the equation, how you calculate it. And so here we're just trying to kind of illustrate the concepts that's behind that. So for example, we're asking, what did it constitute recharge, and when you get credit for recharge? For example, if you are a surface water user, you always use surface water. Say, let's, for example, pick on someone like City of Roseville or City of Folsom. You're a surface water user. That's your baseline. You meet your demand with surface water. When you take banking action and you want to do recharge, you could, if have the right hydrogeology, you could do groundwater injection wells, or you could do spreading basins. And so you could contribute to direct recharge. So in net, you will see you using more surface water than what you use in your baseline, because you're using extra surface water or recycled water, in that matter, for the recharge. So that's, we count your direct recharge. However, you don't have credit for in lieu recharge. You cannot do in lieu recharge, because by definition, you have to have some groundwater in your baseline to offset. So that's for a surface water reliant entity. Next slide. If you are a groundwater reliant entity, i.e., someone like City of Elk Grove, who relies on groundwater, for example, and uses 100% groundwater to meet its demand in one of its service areas at least, and it has a choice. You can participate in groundwater recharge in two ways. One way, they could simply take surface water and reduce their groundwater down. And so that's count as an in lieu recharge, because then the groundwater they would have pumped had remained in the basin and increased storage. Two, they also can participate in direct recharge by taking an extra amount above their demand of surface water or recycled water and use it for injection wells or spreading basins if they have the capacity. Next slide. It gets a little bit complicated. If you are an entity who uses both surface water and groundwater, for example, an entity like Carmichael, for example, you both using surface water and groundwater, you could then participate both in direct recharge and in-lieu recharge in similar mechanism. You reduce your baseline groundwater use to get in-lieu recharge credit and increase your surface water intake for recharge activities. Next slide. So that's kind of the full options and calculations we do for in-lieu for recharge. Next slide. On the recovery side, it's the opposite. So a surface water reliant entity, say for example, city of Roseville, who rely on surface water for the baseline. In dry conditions, they could choose not to use surface water and instead use groundwater. So then they have a foregone surface water that goes into Folsom that becomes available for environmental benefits or other third-party beneficiaries. They also could do what we call direct or physical recovery. That's mean they have extra pumping capacity. They can pump water above what they need and then deliver that groundwater to that banked groundwater to another entity, another neighboring entity, for example, to offset their surface water use. Next slide. You can see the same thing here for a groundwater reliant entity. Again, if you're 100% groundwater in your baseline, you won't be able to participate what we call in in-lieu recovery, i.e. reducing your baseline surface water and have surface water forgone because you don't use surface water in your baseline. But you could increase your groundwater pumping if possible and give it to one of your other neighboring entities to offset their surface water use. Next slide. Again, we see the pattern here again for an entity that uses both surface water and groundwater. They could also do an in-lieu recovery and also increase their pumping to serve a neighboring entity. Next slide. Why is this all important and all of these? Because we have over 22 agencies, surface water water user purveyors in the region. Not all of them are part of the water bank. Hopefully all of them one day will be part of the water bank. But this framework allows for many agencies to participate in the water bank in different ways. Even if you only have surface water in your baseline, you still could participate. If you only have groundwater in your baseline, you can participate. If you have to use both surface water and groundwater, you can participate. And this is the whole idea of this water bank, is using this diverse portfolios we have to build the water bank and build on the capacity. Next. Important term, banking losses. So the banking losses, as we mentioned, as we recharge, what's going to happen is our groundwater elevation is going to rise up, as shown on the figure to the top right. So our groundwater elevation is going to rise. As they rise, two things are going to happen. Again, everyone will be happy we have higher groundwater elevation, but we're going to see more accretions into the interconnected surface water bodies. So we see outflows to the surface water systems, and also we will see probably increased outflow to neighboring basins. So these are the banking losses that water become physically unrecoverable. Next slide. These are losses, yet they're benefits too. So again, they contribute to ecosystem benefits and also downstream areas, and then also contribute to our neighboring basin sustainability, for example, the Cosumnes Basin. Next slide. We will be using the groundwater model that has been developed and validated through the GSP process to calculate these losses. Basically, we're going to run the system without banking and then with banking simply, and then see what the difference, and that difference become these our banking losses. These losses are really important because we need to calculate them and subtract them out from the banked water balances. So when we recover, we make sure we don't take more than what is remaining available in the basin. These losses will be validated every 5-year cycles Why is 5-year cycle? Because we want to do it concurrent with the update to the GSP. As the GSP data get updated every 5 years and the models get validated, we're going to use exact same tools that have been used for the GSPs. Next slide. Leave behind. So leave behind, again, is that intentionally water has been left in the basin to make sure we support local water supply reliability. And that's again being left after accounting for banking losses. So on the graphs on the right, you see that during wet condition we recharge, again raise the groundwater basin. When we recover, we take water, so we lower the groundwater basin, but we don't lower it all the way down. So we have, that's what is left behind. So again, the idea, the concept is, if you do the banking activities, you recharge and recover, at the end of the day, the groundwater basin should be in a better condition than if you didn't do any groundwater banking. So we, the water accounting system, recommend that any banking program should have a leave behind, because it's really important to contribute to groundwater sustainability, augment and provide benefit to the basin. Specifically for the Sac Regional Water Bank context, the participant has committed to a leave behind of 5%. To contribute to the groundwater sustainability. Next slide. And I will stop here and see if there's any questions.
In the Q&A. The first one is from Chris Bonds. Besides the city of Roseville, where else in Sac Regional Water Bank project area are ASR wells installed and or proposed for use in synergy with the Sac Regional Water Bank?
I think Carmichael is in the process of that.
My understanding is the Carmichael Water. Yes, thank you, Ibrahim. My understanding also is the Carmichael Water District is installing ASR wells. Not clear if other agencies are doing the same thing within the region.
My understanding is Sac County is exploring.
Yeah. There may be others that are exploring too, but not quite at the stage of installing. There's a question from David Kling. Are there realistic technologies and technology partners for standardizing on a water banking capability, or still TBD?
I'll go ahead and take this one. Mr. Kling, thanks for asking this question. I think it's more an area of exploration in the future. And I understand your question may relate to two things. You might be asking one thing in particular, like monitoring technologies or maybe optimization technologies. Those are being different. But I just want to say that is an area of exploration in the future for the water bank.
And there is a question from Barbara Egoy. Are you going to quantify the benefits to the ecosystems from surface water accretion in your environmental documents?
I'm going to need some help with this one.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not on camera. This is Heather Waldrop with Stantec responding. Generally, a CEQA document is intended to identify significant impacts of a project and identify mitigation measures to potentially reduce those impacts. Of course, benefits are always great to include and describe and list out as part of the project. Of course, the project is intended to benefit the ecosystem, and so that is an objective of the project. Quantification of those benefits, I think, as far as inclusion in the environmental document, may not be as concise, given the intent of the document is to identify impacts from the project. So I guess the short answer to the question is, if we can incorporate benefits into the discussion as appropriate, then we will absolutely do so.
I don't see any other questions or comments in the Q&A or in the chat, so we're probably ready to move on to the next segment.
Yeah, consistency and coordination with the groundwater sustainability plans and groundwater sustainability agencies. So this is a topic we still actively working on. We spend, as I mentioned, considerable time consulting with the GSAs on this item. We still have a little bit more work to do, but so far we have done a couple things. One is ensured complete consistency with the water bank data sets with those used for the GSPs. So we have the exact same data sets, exact same tools we're using and assumptions to make sure there's no daylight between the GSPs and the water bank. So that's one. Two, conceptually, as you can see here on this figure, as we set up the accounting, we were tracking the losses, we're tracking the recharge and recovery, we're developing the banking balance, and so then we're creating this leave behind mechanism as the water that's gonna be contributed from the banking program into the groundwater basin. And that's what we call as a GSP defined water budget. So these are the water budget that defined in the GSP, where it identified all of the beneficial uses in the basin and all of the balance there. And we want to create it clear that the water bank operate within that construct and stay consistent with it. Next slide. The third item we've been working with is how do we coordinate with the GSPs. During implementation of the water accounting system, we will be ensuring that the monitoring network we use for the water bank is consistent with and inclusive of the monitoring network that is being used by the GSP, so we can share monitoring data between the two. Data in the water accounting system, we will develop reporting and then make these reports available to the GSA for their considerations to ensure consistency with the GSPs. We also envision having at least annual or semi-annual or at least 2 or 3 times a year meetings with the GSPs to ensure coordination on the water bank operation and how those fit with the overall hydrological conditions in the basin. And then we also working right now to outline the adaptive management procedures and how those would be coordinated with the GSAs down the road. Again, as I mentioned, we've done considerable work, but we still have a little bit more work to do to kind of firm up some of these coordination activities.
Okay, and there's a question in the Q&A from Chris Bonds. Besides in-lieu and ASR methods already mentioned, are there other recharge methods being used currently or planned in the future within the water bank area, such as new groundwater recharge basins in undeveloped areas or reclaimed aggregate mining pits in the South American subbasin?
Those are great questions, Mr. Bonds. I don't believe those are actually under consideration right now as recharge mechanisms, potentially down the road, but I don't think that they're actively being considered. And
Ali, do you want to?
We also have some other representatives from other who do a lot of work globally. So I'm reflecting my knowledge of the North American subbasin. Ali Jagavi, I don't know if you want to offer an opinion on this.
I guess if the question is towards whether or not we are capable of analyzing the results of those kind of recharge facilities and or recharge methodologies, the response would be yes, we can. Are those projects in place or contemplated to be in place? I would suggest that depends on the entity and the participating entity for the water bank. I do not think that the water bank necessarily precludes an agency who may want to consider direct recharge through a gravel pit or something, as long as it is appropriately vetted through the environmental process and all of that, we can definitely account for it, and track it in the water accounting system.
Exactly.
But
Thank
but
you.
as far as the way that we've envisioned the project now, and what we're moving forward with in the environmental documentation, recall from some of the earlier slides that it's with existing facilities
Correct.
and without, new water rights or changes to contracts. So it's not that that can't be done in the future, it's just this is where the water bank is starting now to establish all that. And then it can look at other things in the future, and the water accounting system, you're right, is flexible enough to account for different ways of recharge and recovery.
Also.
Thank you.
I don't see, there's another question in the chat from Brett Story. The West Placer GSA members are looking at several future groundwater direct recharge through spreading basins and ASR wells in the near future for the NASB and Placer County. Thanks for that, Brett. I don't see anything else in the Q&A or in the chat. So you can move on.
I also want to thank Mr. Story for that clarification too. We are going to come back to Mr. Peterson's question before the end of the evening. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so implementation and administration. That's the last part of the water accounting system that we'd like to talk with you all about. And it's related to some of the comments and questions that you've had along the way. Roles and responsibilities for the water accounting system. RWA is there to coordinate data collection, management, and maintenance in relation to water accounting system. And the participating agencies, so the ones who are actually conducting the recharge and recovery activities, are also responsible for providing that information to RWA so that it can go into the accounting system itself. Specific to data collection and management, there are a couple of things that are going to be going on. The data and records are going to be maintained within a data management system, so they're easy for RWA to query and be able to analyze the information. There's going to be detailed accounting, especially during active periods of recharge and recovery, so it can be tracked very easily what is going on and where. And the use of existing data collection and reporting activities is going to be done wherever possible to minimize duplication of efforts and provide efficiency. Because as we all know, there's a lot of different things to be done out there, and the more bang that we can get for our buck in one way of pulling information together into a couple different systems, the better. And as far as reporting, RWA is going to be reporting out on recharge and recovery balances on a periodic basis. And they'll also be coordinating those reporting activities with the GSAs, because as most of you know, the GSAs also need to report out on an annual and on a 5-year basis when they're looking at their updates. So the more that everything can be coordinated on that, the better. And then just to remind you all, kind of as a closing on next steps of where the water accounting system is going. I think we talked about earlier in some of the earlier slides that Ibrahim put up there, that the team is developing the water accounting system concept paper that's going to memorialize all this information in there. And we're in the process of wrapping that up now, and it will be publicly available shortly, probably the next month or so, and that will be posted on the website, so look for that.
So previewing what's ahead, next slide, please. We have a sort of a task and activities list laid out by year. You see that we have ongoing communications engagement website and Q&A Connect. For the institutional and technical, we have completed the goals, objectives, principles, and constraints. We talked about that at a prior meeting. We worked through a number of the governance concepts, and that is completed now. Currently, we're working through the water accounting system, otherwise known as the WAS concept paper, and that will be developed, or that is in development, and It will be available in the very, very near future. You see that it's projecting into the year of 2025. We talked about a number of those concepts tonight. We wanted to come back and talk about that at a high level, but that is going to be completed in the very near future. With that, in getting to Mr. Peterson's question, is the matter of previously banked water and credits for that. And right now, that is being analyzed. We're seeing what would be appropriate in terms of how to characterize that. What would be appropriate under the water bank sort of accounting systems. What is available for previously banked water, and in that context, what would we need to apply to make sure that there is a potential quantity of previously banked water while still protecting the groundwater basin and being in compliance with the groundwater sustainability plan. So, Mr. Peterson, I'm hoping that answers your question. Please feel free to ask another question in the Q&A box if we haven't quite gotten that or haven't quite answered your question. Also in development is the monitoring plan. You see that extends to the end of 2025. Contracts and financial agreements, and again, the WAS tool for modeling and environmental work. That modeling work continues. I talked a little bit about that, but with previously banked water or starting balance is, I think, the way that we want to characterize it now. But other work in the future. Also, we're picking up the federal acknowledgement and engaging with reclamation on the work that we need to do in order to secure federal acknowledgement of the groundwater bank. I think that's all I have on this item, and I think that leads us to sort of the end of the presentation, and we're available for more questions and answers.
And there is a question from Barbara Eloy. When do you feel you will be ready to present any additional monitoring the water bank will be doing to make sure it is not impacting GSP monitoring networks with extraction facilities?
When do you feel that you will be ready to present any additional monitoring?
Maybe the details on the monitoring plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Our start is going to be the network of the monitoring network within the GSPs. That's going to be our initial start.
Okay.
And then we will refine it as we go along as needed to meet the needs of the water bank, right? Or the water bank.
So it sounds like sometime this year, maybe even in the near future, we'll have some information to talk about that. That might not be very specific to Ms. Eloy. Stay tuned, Ms. Eloy. We're going to have that information, be able to talk about that. It's coming up.
That can be a topic in the next Stakeholder Forum.
Yeah.
Other questions or feedback from folks? I don't see anything in the Q&A box, but we will stick around here for the next few minutes to see if there are other questions. Oh, and another one just showed up from Chris Bonds. What is the need and significance of gaining federal recognition of the Sacramento Regional Water Bank to its operation and success?
It's a good question. So federal acknowledgement allows the storage of CBP water supplies or water in underground, generally for the duration of the CBP contract. I would say it's not the most critical element of the water bank. It is an important measure of the success. We have a number of local agencies that have CBP contracts and would benefit from that. It will take some time to achieve federal acknowledgement. Just to clarify, and just coming back to this and just sort of being as concise as I possibly can, Key element. It will benefit some members. It is a goal of the water bank. And again, it allows member agencies to store Central Valley Project water underground for the duration of their contract.
And exploration of that is moving along in tandem, but the environmental documentation process on that for NEPA is going to be separate.
Correct.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Other questions or feedback? Well, hearing nothing else, Jim, would you like to?
We have another one.
You have another one. Sorry. From Janice Chung. Is there any thought of preventing what happened with the Kern Water Bank water heist low res?
I would like to know more about that, Ms. Chung. I'm not aware of that, but I'm very curious about this comment and what happened in that situation. I'm gonna have to read up on this. I don't have an answer for you, but I am very curious about this.
Janice just responded, that's the name of the PDF. Can be found maybe on Maven's notebook.
Thank you. I'm gonna have some nighttime reading tonight. Thank you. All right. Okay. I really appreciate this, Mr. Bonds. Thank you very much. And I'm encouraged by this also. So we're going to close this tonight. Again, feel free to reach out to us. You see an email address and also other ways to get a hold of us, waterbankinginfo@rwah2o.org. Our website is, bear with me for just a second, I have to close a window, sacwaterbank.com. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a good night.